So maybe one of the reasons that you haven't found a definitive example of can a nuclease join DNA together or can a protease form a peptide bond is because it's important to remember what an enzyme does. So let's take a quick look back at what an enzyme does. So an enzyme is anything that catalyzes a reaction, right? So anything that reduces the activation energy to make something go forward. So protein that lets you go from A to B to C to D, right? So essentially, what you're asking for is there enzymes that can take us from C and D back to A and B? And the answer is absolutely. So all we need to do is look for an enzyme, let's call it enzyme Q, that would be able to get us from A to B to C to D if we have more A and B, and from C and D back to A and B if we have more C and D. Now, this is a very abstract question, and I know this is exactly what you said. Yes, enzymes work both ways. Uh, so let's look at it in a little bit more detail. So I have here probably one of the most important concepts in biology, which is form follows function. Form follows function means that in biology, we'll see that in so many different layers, from the micro level to the macro level, the way that something looks is very indicative of what it does, right? I have a hand, a bird has a wing. Which of us is more accomplished? Which of us is more suited to fly? The wing. The bird's wing gives it the shape, the structure, the bone density, all these different things that allow it to fly, rather than me flapping my hands or arms or whatever. And this is even more true on a microcellular level. The way that an enzyme looks, the way that a protein looks, is very indicative of how it's going to behave. For example, if you have a protein that looks like a tube, a hollowed out tube, you can safely assume that something is going to pass through the tube. If you look at your hair is made largely of keratin, and keratin looks like a bunch of uh, like sheets stacked on top of each other, and that's what gives it the long, uh, fairly resilient structure. Right, I'm pulling in my hair with a lot of force. It's not destroying any cells. Um, so the way that the protein looks is very related to what the structure will look like. So the reason you can't just say an enzyme will take you from A to B, then C to D, and back and forth for every case is because that's not how the enzyme looks. In the nuclease enzyme looks like a little Pac-Man, and when it finds the thing that it wants to the place where it wants to cut the DNA, it just clips on and cuts it. So if it looks like a Pac-Man that's biting, it's not going to be able to glue things together. So the opposite of the nucleus then would be uh, the ligase, right? So here we have a DNA strand that's going through replication, and right here we have our Okazaki fragments. So our Okazaki fragments are short pieces of DNA that are on our lagging strand. We can get into DNA synthesis some other time, but it's for a different discussion. But our ligase is an enzyme that's going to come in here and join those DNA strands together. So ligase is going to have a shape maybe similar um, to nuclease, but it's going to have the opposite effect. Instead of snipping, it's going to put something there to glue it. So ligase is going to have like a glue stick mechanism, whereas nuclease has a scissor mechanism. Uh, Now, that's not to say that those enzymes don't exist. They absolutely exist, and that's why I have this very complicated mechanism graph here, which is talking to you about glycolysis versus gluconeogenesis. In red, we have glycolysis, and blue, we have gluconeogenesis. So we're starting with glucose in glycolysis and getting down to pyruvate. And in gluconeogenesis, we're starting with pyruvate and going back up to glucose. So let's look right here. This is 1,2-bisphosphate glycerate 2. So 2 meaning that's how many products there are. It's not relevant for this, but 1,2-bisphosphate glycerate, and the way that we refer to it is 1,2-BPG. So if we look at 1,2-BPG, we see that there's phosphoglycerate kinase here and phosphoglycerate kinase here. So we have the ACE, and that just immediately is a dead giveaway that it's an enzyme. So what this means is, given the right situation, if we can go from 1,2-BPG here with phosphoglycerate kinase to 3PG here, 3-phosphoglycerate. And we can go from 3PG here to, with phosphoglycerate kinase, to 1,2-BPG here. And you can see a couple others. Enolase here, from PEP, phosphoenol pyruvate, with enolase we can go to 2PG, and from 2PG with enolase we can go to PEP. Now, the important thing here is not the structure so much, because the structure is either adding or taking away things. And it's very easy to do that. The important thing here is the physiological conditions. These are happening in your body. So there's so many different hormones, receptors, uh, chemical levels of glucose, chemical levels of the substrate, chemical levels of the reactant, completely other chemical levels. There's so many different things that are interacting that tell these enzymes to change their shape to make sure that it can go from 1,2-BPG to 3-PG and back and forth. So shape is the most important thing, not necessarily just the name or uh, the direction of the reaction. An enzyme can absolutely work in both ways as long as its shape allows it to.